So, welcome back, everyone. First, I want to thank you again for your patience last week. I still have the cough. I had bronchitis, and they told me I might still have the cough for another 3 weeks, but I don't feel sick anymore. So, let's hear it for antibiotics. Um, so, the plan for the night is I'm going to lecture to 7 o'clock. As far as we get to 7, you'll have a break. And then you'll take the test. The test is on Blackboard. It's not open yet. It will open when we start the test. So you'll be able to download the test. It's the same thing as before. Multiple choice. You just highlight your answers or write down the answers on a piece of paper or write in to an email document. You'll attach your essay questions because remember you were allowed to look up the answers to the essay questions. You're not for the multiple choice. You do have to be on camera when you're taking the test. So, right now, if you don't want to be on camera, that's fine, but you have to be on camera to take the test. If your camera on your computer's not working, you can pull your cell phone out and set that up so I can see you. We do have a few people so far who have notified me that they have no power. So I will be giving a retest on a day. I just don't, it's going to be up to those people who missed the test what day it's going to be. But they'll have a different version of the test since the test will open and they would have access. So it'll be the same material, but it will be a different test. So I don't want you to feel like they're going to have an advantage over you. It will be a different test that they will take. So let's get started. I am recording it since there might be some people who miss it. There's a lot of areas that are without power. You may have got the alerts. South Campus is down, Boys Campus is down. We would have had class anyway because we're a Zoom class. It just wouldn't have been a matter of where I was Zooming from. So I was teasing for the people who came on early. If this would have been closed, I would have been probably going down to the casino and using their Wi-Fi, or doing it from my car on my little hotspot that I have. But we're good. So let's get started. We'll see how far we get till 7 o'clock and go from there. 71728182 are all filmed and the links are already on Blackboard. I'm going to start with 73, even though 73 is filmed also. But I want to do 73 and 83. As far as we get on 83, and then if we don't finish 83 by 7 o'clock, that's where I'll start next week. Again, all of the nines are already filmed and then death and dying. So we just have a couple more. And then the very last week, it's just the test. So you just log on for the test, take the test, send me your paper, and probably by either Saturday or Sunday, I'll send you your grade for your paper. I would send you the grade for that final exam, and I will send you the grade for the entire course. So you'll get one email that will have all the rest of your grades. It will also have your activity grade, since I can't do that yet, since not everyone has all their activities in yet, or any extra credit people might be doing, because remember, you can still do the game if you want for extra credit. So you don't have to do that game. But if you don't do well on the exam, it's an easy way to get some extra points. So let me share my screen. Okay. And I'm going to close this off. So we're now into early adulthood, which is where you guys are at. So this should be a really easy section for most of you. And let me get ahead here. Okay. A lot of good stuff in this one. So when we talk about going from that transition from adolescence and emerging adult to adulthood, a lot of things go on. Who are they? What do they want to do? It can be a time of some instability for some people who don't know really where they want to go, or as they're looking for a job, choosing the right job, choosing if they want to be in a relationship, etc. So there's a lot of self-focus during that time. Sometimes they feel kind of in between. Some of their friends may already be in a relationship and maybe even married already. Others have decided that they want to work on their career first and maybe later. And then some people decide that they don't want to get married and don't want to be in a relationship. So a lot of things can go on there. But this is one of the best times of your life. I always think of that song, it's called The Lights. You know, it goes back a few years, but it talks about, these are the nights that you should be uh, proud of, and you should do things and experience because when you're old, you're going to look back on them. So I always think of that song when I do this section because this is also the time that most people were most active in getting out and meeting people and getting their careers started. So, Erickson, again, intimacy versus isolation. Again, intimacy doesn't mean sex, it means relationship when we're talking about, uh, psychology. So, uh, deciding if you want to, venture out and share who you are with people, or if you stay more to yourself. Um, you can become still very devoted to your friends, your family, also to your job. you know. But you can have issues too. A lot of people during this time may feel very lonely or very isolated, and sometimes, depending on their circumstances, it can actually cause some fear in relationships with others. So they kind of take a step back and kind of let others lead, if you know what I mean by that. Um, Most of Erickson's stuff was based on heterosexuals. I mean, there's more research now coming out on the LGBTQ uh, communities because everything's much more open now. So friendship is very, very important at this time. That need to belong and feel like you're part of some sort of established relationship with others. And you don't have to have a lot of friends. A lot of people have a lot of acquaintances, but they tend to have a smaller number of friends, like a handful of people that they feel that they can trust, and they have similar interests. They live close to each other or work together or in the same neighborhood. And as we get older, sometimes those relationships can change. So, research shows that these are the top qualities that people look for in a friend. Someone who can keep confidences and, someone you can trust to keep your secrets and not go running around telling everyone your business. They're loyal to you. There's a warmth. You feel comfortable around them, affectionate. You care about the person. It may go another step later on, into a singular person that you care a lot about. Then we move into that other stage of love. These people are supportive. They're also very frank. And what I mean by that is they're going to tell you the truth. If you ask them, do these jeans look fat? Do I look fat in these jeans? And if you do, they're going to tell you. And it's not that they want to hurt your feelings, but they also want to protect you because you're, their friend. And a good sense of humor. The research was done originally on college students and graduate students where they asked 1,000 men and women what characteristics they looked for in a friend or someone possibly that they would be interested in dating. And men answered for their number one choice was looks. And the number one looks for women was stability. Did they have a job, where they stable at where they're at in their life? But for both men and women, the fourth item down the list was a good sense of humor. So both men and women agreed that that's really important in a relationship. So when we move from liking someone to loving someone. There's kind of a progression that you see happen. So they tend to be together longer. Uh, they look for each other. They seek each other's company. They want to spend time with them because they enjoy being with them. They're open to be physically intimate, so moving into passion. They are willing to share positive, negative, criticism, praise, and they're not afraid to say that to that person because they know that person would also do that to them. They have that honesty between them. They try to hold on to that relationships, the goals that they may have for each other. They tend to react in a similar way, so there are a lot of similarities. You know, that old line, opposites attract in psychology, no, that doesn't really pan out. Most relationships don't do well if you are so opposite that you have nothing to talk about. You don't share anything in common. Now, in all relationships, you still need that freedom to do stuff that you like to do and maybe your partner doesn't want to do. But you do have to have some connection to that person for that relationship to stay together. And we'll talk about that more when we get to the 8.3 stuff for the older individuals. So once they decide that they're interested in this person and the other person's interested in them, they actually see themselves as a couple, not as just two individuals. So there are many faces of love. And lots of research has been done with love. And again, there is no one answer. People could write a book on love, you know. So usually it starts with some sort of physical arousal. You're attracted to that person and you have interest in that person more than just with a friend or a neighbor or a cousin. You know, it's you really want to know that person. You really want to share their life, and they want to share yours. You may have fantasies about the other individual. That's perfectly natural at this time period. Uh, Mood swings, you know, they say something and it just bothers you, and you're like all of a sudden you go from, well, maybe they don't like me, or what did I say, or did I? You go through these extremes at the beginning of the relationship. It gets better as you get closer to this person. But yeah, some people can be hurt from even just the way they send a text, or maybe they don't text. You know, you're ghosted for a while and you're like, oh my gosh, it's like, and you didn't know that they were on a business trip or something, but that mood swing occurs at not only in late adolescence, but again, this early adulthood. And you feel close to that person. You feel passion. Again, you would like to have a physical intimacy with that person. And you have this exclusive relationship. So there are, like I said, a couple researchers who have done a lot of work on this. So let's just talk about passionate love versus companionate love. Passionate love is the sex. It's you want to have that physical connection, not only a mental connection, but a physical connection to that person versus companionate love. Your best friend. You don't want to necessarily have sex with them unless prior to you having passionate love for them, you were already a friend. But in many different cultures, they have a completely different sense of love. So we're looking traditionally at Western culture when we talk about love. Sternberg, you should know his triangular theory of love. And he says there are three components. So it's intimacy, again, that's relationship, passion, which is sex, and commitment. You're going to be there for that person. And he says there are all different combinations of this. So on this chart coming up in a minute after this, it gives you an example of each of these types of love: non-love, liking, infatuated love, empty love, romantic love, companionate love, fatuous love, or consummate love. Consummate love is the be all end all of love. Some people never get there. And some people get there and they fall out of that type of love, maybe only certain components. So let's look at this chart. And it gives you a breakdown. And you don't have to memorize this chart, but understand this chart. Okay. So non-love would be you're not intimate, you're not passionate, and you have no commitment to that person. So, you know, your neighbor moves in and you go over and you bring them cookies. You're not in a relationship with them, you're not thinking about having sex with them, and you've made no commitment to them other than bringing them cookies. Liking, so intimacy, relationship is there, but no passion and no commitment. Okay. Infatuated love, short term based on sexual attraction. So let me give you an example. So you go out to the bar on a Friday night and you're thinking, well, maybe I'll meet someone here. And you're at the bar and you had a couple drinks and you look over to the corner and you're thinking, oh, no, there's nobody here. I'm interested here tonight. Ugh, bartender, can I have another Long Island iced tea? And you down that drink, and some more people walk into the bar, and it's now 10 o'clock, and still you're looking around going, "Ugh, there's nobody I'm interested in here. And bartender, can I have another drink?" And this goes on till like around, say, 11 or 12 o'clock. And finally you see that person, well, they're kind of good looking. I think I might want to meet them. Bartender, can you send some drinks over to that table over there and say it was from me? And you go over and you start talking and you seem to hit it off and you're getting a little touchy-feely. And it's like, hey, do you want to go back to my place? And they say yes. And you go home and you have sex. And next thing you know, it's morning and you're doing the walk of shame home. Or you're just like, okay, it was one night. I don't even remember what your name is, and you don't care. Okay. That's what we mean by infatuated love. The only thing that's there is that passion, sex. Okay. Empty love. Okay. No intimacy. There's no relationship there. No passion, but commitment's there. So this is a couple who's been married for years, and the only reason they're staying together is for the kids. And once the kids turn 18, they are out of there. So they're literally just there for some other reason. Romantic love, intimacy, and passion are there, but not necessarily commitment. So there's no final, they didn't get married, they haven't, made the decision that they're going to stay together and even necessarily be exclusive. So companionate love, again, intimacy is there, decision is there, you're going to be with that person and they're going to have your back, but there's no sex. Okay, that's like your best friend. Infatuated love, again, no intimacy, but the sex and the commitment are there. Okay, it might be a short period of uh, time, but you are there. You don't really know each other very well, but you decide, when we talk about love at first sight, things can change, in a very short period of time. And then, of course, consummate love. That's a nice long-term relationship with intimacy and passion and that commitment. So when we talk about, you know, characteristics, like I said, here in the United States, we are more of an individualistic society. Other cultures, you know, sometimes they're in arranged marriage. They don't have a choice. Their parents may have set it up. They may have been set aside a long time before, like when they were 8 or 9 years old, that, hey, you're going to marry this person when you get to be this age. We, as from the United States, we think that's crazy. Like, how can you marry somebody you don't love or you don't know or even, have been some time with them? But that does make a difference. And there are gender differences in culture. Again, I mentioned physical attraction was number one for men when they interviewed men, and women prefer someone, again, industrious, stable, ambitious. Okay. So there are certain characteristics. Now, everyone is different. So they're just giving you a generalization from all the research that was done. So the thing that we see in common, love and mutual attraction is important. Dependability, you can trust this person to be there. Emotionally stable, that you enjoy being with them. They're not some mean ogre, bitch person. Um, and they have at least a comparable intelligence to what you have. It makes it very hard if the intelligences don't match. You have to work so much harder in order to communicate. And there can be some, again, gender stereotyping in different cultures that have nothing to do with, uh, who the person is. But that is still out there because we still have gender stereotypes. So how do we decide who might become a spouse to us or a candidate for someone that we would want to spend a lot of time with, maybe even the rest of our lives? So again, similarities, things that we have in common, things that we are compatible about, and that you do have some attraction to that person, some physical attraction, psychological attraction, intellectual attraction to that person. And, you know, a lot of times women, you know, have a little more difficult time because there are more women typically out there looking for men than men are for women. So they have a larger group of candidates that might fit their needs. And again, you don't have to memorize the chart, but it just kind of goes through. So this is okay, these are the people that are potentials. What do we have in common? Physical attractiveness. Are you attracted to that person? All the way down to, okay, this is who's eligible. And yeah, I think I want to uh, continue my life with this person. When we talk about gays and lesbians seeking long-term meaningful relationships, just like, you know, heterosexual relationships, it's the same. And now, like I said, we can at least talk about it. For years. So much was kept quiet because of, excuse me, society. So what do we look for? So way back when we did attachment, this would have been the first and the second class. We talked a little bit about attachment styles. And the research shows the attachment style that we had as an infant really does influence our attachment style when we're an adult. So if you had a secure attachment to someone when you were young, you trusted them, they cared for you, when you were a baby, they fed you, they changed your diaper, they were there for you, they didn't leave you fending for yourself. You had a secure attachment. About 80% of the population has had at least a secure attachment. And that means that you have a good chance of having a secure attachment in a relationship when you're older. Avoidant attachments, when you were younger, that those people in your life weren't there for you for whatever reason. Could have been work, could be drugs, alcohol, um, a number of possible reasons, but you never made the connection. So you are afraid of getting attached to someone because you're afraid you're going to get hurt. And these are the ones, like if you've known someone maybe in a relationship for a really long time and they've never taken that next step, and one person out of the pair definitely would like to take the next step, but the other is avoidant. It's not unusual for that avoidant person to end the relationship. And they do that because they don't want to be hurt. They want to stop it. They can't fathom the idea of this other person not wanting them or trying to end the relationship. So they would rather end the relationship now on their own terms other than waiting for it to happen to them. So they usually have a hard time in relationships. And ambivalent attachment, it takes a long time for them to have intimacy with people. It's not that they can't have it, but when they were younger, they may have had some ups and downs. Some people may have been there for them, and other people they didn't trust or they were so afraid that they were going to leave. The ambivalent attachment adults, they will be like a clinger. They will do whatever they can to try to hold on to you, no matter what. These are the people who don't necessarily trust their spouse or their significant other. They want to look at their phone. They want to see their emails, their texts. Uh, the one person goes out with their friends and they follow them to see if they're actually doing that. Some people have even hired private investigators to check up on their significant others. And, there was one research study that interviewed some younger women that were so afraid of losing their man that they actually poked holes in the condoms to try to get pregnant, thinking that that might keep the man in the relationship longer. And review, sample question, sample question. So cohabitation, this is going to sound crazy, but believe it or not, um, there's a higher chance of divorce if you live together before marriage. Um, there's a definite decline in marriage or people waiting longer to get married. Uh, it's very common for people to live together without being married. Back in the 50s and the 60s, that was, no, you don't do that. There was a very big stereotype for people who did that. But there are about 7.5 million people that are currently cohabitating with their significant others. And married couples do make a minority versus in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s, where the majority would have been married. Young adults typically will start cohabitating in their 20s. Some will wait to their 30s, but usually by late 20s. And some people think, hey, this is just a practice for marriage. But again, as I said, there's actually a higher chance of divorce if you live together before marriage. And again, don't have to memorize the chart. It just gives you some of the statistics. Marriage, in many cases, is still the preferred alternative for most early adult individuals. It's the right thing to do, especially if there are children involved. It does provide a little more security and financial well-being, especially if both are working. The spouse fills a sexual role. Remember, we are sexual beings, so that is part of the relationship. Marriage offers that total acceptable way of having children. In other words, there's nobody going to say anything to you. Oh, you're not married and you have a child. Now, it's much more open, of course, now and this generation, but if you're married, nobody even questions it. Actually, many times they may question you if you don't have children. Like, oh, you don't have any children yet. So, and there are some legal benefits and protections, even doing your taxes, you get a better write-off for being married. And there are fewer U.S. citizens now than there were over, 130 some years ago uh, that are not married. Um, Higher divorce rates, people waiting longer, not, getting married right out of high school or right out of college, people wanting to get settled in their career and their job, especially with more women in the workforce versus 50 years ago when it was kind of assumed that you were going to get married and have kids, and the woman would be the one who stayed at home and took care of the kids. But about 90% of people will eventually marry. And again, you can see the chart that kind of gives you an idea. So, what makes marriage work? Successful marriages, affection for each other. Big one, next one, put a little star next to it. Partners communicate the positive. So, in other words, they communicate positively to their significant other. Okay. They see themselves as part of this couple. Um, they always talk about, marriage and, oh, you're going to do this and you're going to do that and that. But that interaction between the two people is very, very important. Again, similar interest and role distribution, deciding even before you get married, hey, when we get married, do I have to do all the cleaning and the cooking, or you're a better cook? How about if you cook and I'll clean? Or I'm going to go to work. I want to go to work too. Okay, well, we have to share the home responsibilities. Setting that up ahead of time can save a lot of fighting after marriage. Only about a half of all marriages will remain intact for the life of the two individuals. It's not unusual early. Newly married couples might fight. Even if you were together with that person a long time, even if you lived with the person, people change. People grow, they develop, they get different interests, and it can cause some issues. I think I might have mentioned in one of the other lectures that I had a friend whose uh, grandmother, they were married 65 years. And I asked him, what is it? What's the secret to being married for 65 years? The first one was a good sense of humor, which fits, right? And communication, and never going to bed angry. Even if you disagree, going to bed, you know, saying that you love each other and you care for each other, you just agree to disagree about something. And the woman said the reason why she said that, what happens, I would feel horrible if for something happened and my husband died overnight. So they had made that agreement that they would never go to bed angry at each other. They could have long discussions and even drag out fights, but they would still go to bed saying that they cared for each other. So it can be a difficult transition to go from adolescence and adulthood, and depending on where you're at in that stage, it may be a little harder when you're younger than if you're, 30. But you have to also make sure you have an identity apart from your spouse. In other words, if you don't, if one partner is much stronger in personality, sometimes the other individual uh, kind of gets stepped on. Um, they just accept the role of the other person making decisions and doing things. And that in itself is not a good relationship. So, for a lot of people, the newlywed period is happiness and joy. And that, when we talk about the next section, we'll talk about the marriage gradient. It's like a U-shaped curve. It starts out really great, and then it kind of goes down. If you think of the shape of the U, as kids come into the picture and you're working and everything, and you have all these other responsibilities, and your parents are getting older and you have to take care of them too. And then eventually when the kids get out of the house, the U starts to go up the other side. So the relationship gets a little better because you now have more time to spend together and do things together. Really important, date nights. Very important that even after you're married, you should at least plan at least once a month as a date night, even if you don't go out of the house. Just time with you and your significant other to spend together and do something that you enjoy doing. There are people who like being single, want to be alone, or have, realize they have, so much going on in their life, it wouldn't be fair to have a relationship with someone because they, wouldn't be able to spend as much time as should be spent with that relationship. So 20% of women and about 30% of men live a single life. Again, some they have a negative view of marriage, possibly because their parents maybe got divorced or someone they know had a very negative relationship. They may feel that marriage is too restrictive, and maybe they haven't met anyone that they wish to spend their lives with, or their circumstances that, the one person in the relationship was in a marriage and, they got cheated on and they're afraid that might happen again. So they made this promise to themselves that they would never marry again because they don't want to be hurt again. So um, that's, a reason why someone might just stay single for the rest of their lives. They like independence, they like autonomy and freedom. They don't have to say, hey, I'm going to the store. They can just go to the store. Hey, I want to spend this money and buy a new car without having to, do this. Hey, I want to take money out of my account, and it's a, if it's a relationship that you're in with your significant other, you have a joint account, you hey, I'm going to take out a couple $100 to buy this. So when you're single, you don't have that to worry about, it's all yours. So what makes a couple decide to have children, other than it might have been unintentional and it just happened? It's roughly $233,000 to support one child until he or she is 18. Throw on the cost of college, assuming you're not going to CCAC, that you're going to Pitt or CMU or Duquesne or Carlow, and you're going to spend a lot of money for that person. Childcare, if you're both working, sometimes it's cheaper if one person stays home other than paying childcare. So, what other reasons? Just the pleasure of watching your children grow, and you feel excitement when they accomplish things, especially if you know it's something that they were working on very, very hard. Seeing them be successful, enjoying them, uh, finding relationships and friendships, and also still being close to you. And believe it or not, this one is actually a real thing, having someone to take care of them when they're old. If you're single, you don't have a lot of options if you don't have a lot of family. I always share this. I'm an only child. I'm not married. I have good friends, but I would never think of my good friends to have to take care of me in my old age. So, it's something that I have to plan for because I, I'm the only Shablowski left, and I have one cousin in Texas. So It's something that I have to think about. And anybody who's single in that situation would have that same thing that they have to think about. If you have a family business or just companionship, having somebody to be with, um, more than 90% of married couples have a child or have adopted or foster children. Sometimes, we do have what were unplanned pregnancies, and typically that can occur when young adults are younger or adults that are less educated. Um, I had two eighth graders. I think I might have told you that, they had sex the first time and they didn't think they could get pregnant the first time, and she got pregnant, and they were 14. So it does happen, when people fall into that passion and uh, didn't prepare for that. 59% of women are married when they have children. Half of births to women under the age of 30 occur outside of marriage. And young adult women with college degrees choose to be married before they have children. Family size has changed. I have a good friend whose mom and dad had 12 children, and then they adopted six and they fostered two. Now they lived on a farm, and they're from like they were like traditional German Mennonite descent. Um, but they never had all 20 at the same time. Like some had already grown and moved away when they started adopting and fostering. But most families now have, it comes out to be like 2%, uh, two kids. It used to be 2.5, but we even have less children now, so it's like 1.9. In some other countries, it's six children. And again, you don't have to memorize the chart, but it just gives you an idea of how it changed over the generations. So more women are using contraceptives. More women talk about using contraceptives. More women are working. A lot of women are waiting to their 30s to have children. And it's expensive to have children. When we have two people working, we now have 75% of married women work outside the home. In the 50s and the 60s, and most women stayed home at least until the kids were in school. So what do they do when it comes to chores? And as I mentioned, that should be something that actually should be discussed between the couple before they even get married. One of the other things they should discuss is how they're going to raise their children. What's going to be their method of discipline? What are they going to do in different situations? And just not do it on a wing and a prayer at the time when it happens, to actually think about it ahead of time so they make the best choices. And again, some of the possible activities. This is a breakdown of how many times, housework, food, lawn care is split between the partners. So there are positive and negative changes that occur after we have a child in the relationship. And sometimes marital satisfaction can stay steady, and sometimes it decreases after they have a child, because there's less time for them to work together on their relationship. So hopefully they have the relationship at least semi with it before they have a child. They have to still try to do things, be aware of events, things that are, your significant other is doing, and celebrate those events, being able to work out and solve problems together, And co-parenting definitely does work well. It shouldn't be left up to just one parent. In the gay and lesbian community, 20% of gay men and lesbian women are parents. And again, same as in heterosexual communities, research shows that children raised in a homosexual home show no difference in adjustment. For years, people said, oh, they can't have children, they can't do it because they're all going to turn out to be gay. That's not true. And it's tons of research that's come out to show that. But again, it's still a stereotype that's out there in our world. And review, sample question. And the last of this section. So who are these people and what do they want to do? What type of careers do they want? This typically occurs between 20 and 40, that young adult period. And a lot of times a career may take a back step for a while, and in other individuals, it's the first thing that they look for is their career, and then intimacy takes a back step. So what do you look for in a job? In other words, extrinsic, what are the tangible rewards? How much are you getting paid? How much vacation time do you get? Do you get to work from home? Do you have to go into the office? Do you have to travel? How many days a week do you work? How many hours a day do you work? Are you on call? I could go on and on. I don't want to do that, but you can understand extrinsic. Is there a way to move up in the company that you can see your career further down the line? Intrinsic. You like what you're doing. No matter how much money they pay you, if you hate your job, it's terrible. I mean, it's psychologically, it can be so draining if you hate your job. And just in general, work, they feel that they're doing something important, that they're doing something that they want to do. It does give you a sense of personal identity. It does give you access to a social life because you meet a lot of people in your job, and it can even just determine your status, even according to stereotypes. So, where are you at in your job? Are you management? Are you mid-level? Or are you just entry level? Even within a corporation, that you're working for, there are different levels of status that you have. If you're in administration, you have a different status than the person who, is the maintenance person. So job satisfaction is important, the nature of the job, and that you have a variety. I have a friend that for years, she always lied about what her job was. And it wasn't until she actually hurt her back at work and was telling people that she had to take off from her job. Well, she had told us that she was a phone uh, person, like for Medicare and Medicaid. People called, asked questions, things like that. And we couldn't understand how hurting her back would mean she couldn't do her job because she did it from home. And it wasn't until after that, and she was off for a while, and we found out that actually she was a custodian at one of the local hospitals, and she couldn't do her job because she hurt her back. But she never told anyone that was her job. So she had to put that lie, until eventually people figured it out. It's like, I don't understand. You can come here and do this and but you sit in your job. Why can't you sit and do your job? So they're all different people feel that they have a stereotype to status. There's nothing wrong with, any job. If you have a job, you make it yours, and it's a great thing to do. You've put your time and effort, and you need people to have all these different positions. So job satisfaction tends to be better if people like their job. and yeah, supervisors and admin do have a lot more control. And because they do, they tend to be more satisfied with their job. Now, there are three uh, career themes to Ginsberg's career choices. And he says there are three um, periods. And I have it down in the notes. I just don't have the notes up right now, but it is written down in the notes. The fantasy period is like when we're younger. I want to be an astronaut and I want to be a nun, okay, at the same time. It's like the possibilities. The next week you want to be, a postal worker. The following week you want to be a teacher, so it changes. It's fantasy. Tentative period would be like adolescence, maybe into early adulthood. And this is what you would like to do. You've kind of narrowed down and looked, okay, if I want to go into medicine, I have to take a lot of science classes and math classes. So you start to prepare yourself for that. And then the realistic period is when you get there and realize, I can do this. Or maybe you start taking these math and science classes and calculus comes along and physics, and you're not really good at these classes. So maybe you need to reevaluate what you're good at and your goals and your desires and the gifts that you have. And this is what I have to offer, and so I'm going to go this direction. Some critics say it's kind of oversimplistic, but it's the basic framework of what everyone goes through. Holland's personality type, and I believe I have these all listed in the notes also. So I'm not going to go through all of them since they're all there, but they're pretty straightforward, realistic. What you do is you're real. This is what you're actually able to do. Intellectual ability, social, you work well with individuals. Conventional, you follow the rules, you follow the laws and the traditions. Enterprising, these are people that are the go-getters, the creators, they're awesome in sales and marketing and doing things that may take more of a role of going out into the community. And artistic could be an artist, singer, athlete, musician, etc. But again, not everyone fits into one little personality type. So when you read through the different personality types, you may see that you may see yourself in a couple of these personality types, not just necessarily one. So when we talk about how things have changed, at one time, you could advertise job is only for men, this job is only for women. That's illegal to do that now because of discrimination. Um, Women were still at this time period considered most appropriate for communal professions like teachers, nurses, etc., things, salespeople, etc. Men, uh, more engaged things that physical things with their hands, occupation, with doing something, accomplishing a goal, uh, hardworking, many hours, etc. Still continuing on with that, women were underrepresented for a long time in some of the male-dominated professions like engineering and computer programming. Women still earn less than men in many jobs. So there still is a little bit of a glass ceiling out there. It's better than it used to be, but it's still there. And the amount of women in the workforce has risen quite a bit from 35% to 60% of women are now out in the uh, workforce in some way, whether it's getting a salary or volunteer work. It could be that also. And as I mentioned, that glass ceiling, that's when there are two equal jobs. Everything's equal, the criteria, the degrees and everything, but the male or the minority person makes less money than or excuse me, the female in the minority make less money than the men in the community. And again, you don't have to memorize the chart, but it just gives you a good breakdown of what the research says. So, how do we choose a career? Again, know yourself. Figure out your choices. If you don't know, you can go to most college campuses have, like a counselor that you can speak to. You can do it's a test, a career test. It has uh, testing of vocation testing. It has about 400 questions that you answer, and it comes up with things that fit your interest and tells you what careers are uh, in that area where you might find that something you would like to do. Pros and cons, you try it out for a while. Internships are a great way to do that. Um, there's no permanent mistake. You can always change your job. You can always change your career. It's not a one and done thing. Um, being realistic with your abilities and your interest and where your life is. If you already have a family, traveling 4 days a week out of 7 may not be a good career choice for you. Review, review, sample question, and sample short answer question. Okay, and let me get out of this. Now let me get rid of the PowerPoint too. Okay. Okay. You're an only child? Yes, I am too. Okay, any questions on that before we start the last one for today? Okay. So this is going to be 8-3. So again, it's going to be the uh, social and psychology of, and this is going to be middle adulthood because 8-1 and 8-2 are filmed for you. So let me get this out of the way. And like I said, I'm trying to watch time. I'm going to do my best to try to get this in before before the 7 o'clock time. But if we don't, I'm not really worried. It's more important that you have time for the test. Okay. So again, starting with Erikson, uh, you know, some of his stuff at this time period, the crisis, again, it's not a crisis as in, the house is burning down or things like that. Decision making, things have really changed since Erikson's model and gender roles. They were much more rigid, men did this, women did this, and this is how it was. And that has changed immensely. So if a woman had her first baby at 21, uh, she would have the same psychological things going on if she had her first child at 39. Being a parent, the first child is going to be the same no matter what your age is. You might be a little slower running after your 2-year-old, but the same feelings, the same emotions that occur, and during this middle adult is where most people really, really grow as a person. Erikson's stage would be generativity versus stagnation. Generativity is doing things, stagnation is just staying the same. When we talk about generativity, you're giving back to the community. You're doing things for others, and you're trying to leave some sort of contribution, whether it's your family, whether it's your parents, whether it's the food bank, your church, the community, whatever it is, you're going out there and giving back. You're the baseball coach, you're the cheerleading moderator, you're driving your kids to dance and hockey and soccer and volleyball. You're doing things for others at this time. People who are stagnated, they haven't done much of anything. They kind of just care about themselves and kind of stay to themselves. Even if they have a family, they may choose not to, you know, give back. They never volunteer to take the kids to basketball or that. It's like they don't want to get involved. When we talk about keeping meaning, this is the time period is basically 40 to 60 that we're looking at. And that middle time period is between 45 and 55. And this is when people accept themselves for who they are. These are the strengths you have. These are the weaknesses you have. These are the strengths that someone else has. These are the weaknesses of others. And you're not going to change them. The only person who can change them is themselves. So when we talk about the different stages, you don't have to memorize the different stages, but um, a lot of people think of midlife crisis, and there really isn't a midlife crisis technically. There are certain patterns that we see people have when they reach midlife, but it isn't necessarily a time period that say everyone's going to go through this at this particular time. There's very little research that actually shows that. Okay. So again, don't have to memorize the chart, but just gives you an idea of what's going on at each stage, but you're not responsible for knowing all these different stages. But you can see it's kind of a progression as people go through from leaving home and being more of an individual to as they get older, towards the end of the stage, like I said, it goes to 60. They're much more tolerant. They're much more accepting of themselves and others. They tend to be less negative and a little more mellow. That may change when they get into late adulthood. But for right now, they tend to be a lot more easygoing and flexible. And when we talk about the seasons of life, we talk about spring, summer, fall, winter of life. So we're now moving to the into kind of the fall part of the life where they get older. It's a little bit of that transition. And around 40 to 45, again, some people realize that, hey, I'm getting older. You know, their life has responsibilities. They might start to see their first gray hair or their first wrinkles. They may get aches and pains that they never had before. If they were doing something, like flag football, on Thanksgiving, and the next day they can just barely get out of bed. That didn't happen before. So the joys of Bengay or Voltaren, become personal for them. They realize they can't do everything. They realize that, they are getting older and they may have to make some adaptations or changes. And for some people, that takes a really long time to get through to them. So, according to Livingston, he says there might be a thing called midlife crisis, but again, there's no research that actually says that there is. A time where you're not satisfied with what you've done, and maybe you want to do things for yourself, and you look back on your life and you see some mistakes you might have made, and you're not happy with them, so you want to make some changes. But again, the sample that he used was such a small sample. It was like 150 people that he interviewed. So, I mean, that's nowhere near the amount of people you should have in a research study to make this kind of observation that there's midlife. So, is it a reality or myth? Actually, no, it's not really a thing. Do we see patterns? And these are the patterns you would, think to see. Most people at this time have a career and it's blossoming. If it's not, they've decided to change or at least change jobs. So for most people, it's smooth, rewarding, They are involved in their families, their friends, other social groups. Um, they tend to still feel healthy at this time period. They don't necessarily exhibit any outward signs of midlife. We do see some people, again, that will do things like they've always wanted a sports car and they don't care. They're going to get a sports car if so there they are driving around in their sports car. That's okay, you know, unless they're taking all the money out of the account so the family doesn't have food or pay the rent. Because there are consequences to our actions. And at this time period, we realize that there are consequences. Some people will do it anyway. Those people, maybe you could say, or experience some psychological effects of midlife, but we wouldn't really call it a crisis. So it can be a time of uncertainty, indecision, and again, it was such a limited sample. But most people, again, exhibit um, positive, smooth, rewarding transition. And again, a chart that you don't have to memorize. So age is a construct. Remember that um, age is in a person's mind. You might be 80, but you think like a 25-year-old, and that's a great thing. Or you may be 25 and act like you're 80. There are differences, but culture also defines who you are and your responsibility, and if you're male or female in many cases. Psychologists disagree whether personality changes or remains the same. There's more research saying that personality actually does remain stable through adulthood, but there is some research out there that it can change. And typically, it changes if there's been some major occurrence in your life. A loved one died, you lost your job, some horrible thing happened to you, you were attacked, and because of that, you have injuries now, or you have cancer. Those things can change your personality, but in general, most people, it's pretty stable through adulthood. Here's the big five personality theory, and we're going to go through each of them. I always, when I teach my intro to psych class, I spend a lot of time on the big five. Um, and I don't know who you had for intro, so I don't know if they spent a lot of time on it. So I copied my slide from my intro class into this slide so we could go over it quickly because it makes a little more sense when you can see it. So the acronym to remember the big five is OCEAN, OCEAN, the first letter of each of the different types of personality. This is the one that most psychologists agree with. And there are other theories, but this is the big one. So this is the one you should know. Okay. So let's go in order of OCEAN. Openness to experience. Again, are you willing to try new things or are you closed? And are you open to new experiences? Are you willing to try new things? These are sliding scales. That means you could fall anywhere on this scale. In this case, you'd probably want to lean somewhere from here, like that far. Extremes in psychology are bad. They are. Because, when you have that extreme personality type, negative things can possibly happen. If you're closed off to new experiences, you're not growing at all as a person. And if you're extremely open, you may do things that maybe you shouldn't be doing. In other words, somebody says, "Hey, I'll give you $10 if you get naked in class." Okay, that wouldn't be a good thing to do. Okay. Uh, Conscientiousness, dependable, undependable. Again, undependable, pretty straightforward. You ask somebody for a ride, you're waiting and waiting and waiting for them to come, and they never show up. And you call them, and they're down at the bar drinking. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I was supposed to pick you up. Oh, well, just take an Uber home. You're never going to ask them for a ride again, are you? No. Dependable, and you might say, well, why wouldn't I want to be dependable? You can be dependable. You don't want to be the extreme of dependable because then you're a doormat. People can take advantage of you, they can use you, and psychologically, that's not a good place to be. Next in ocean, E, extroversion, withdrawn or outgoing, and that's pretty self-sufficient on that one. I don't think I have to explain withdrawn or outgoing. Agreeableness, and again, low agreeableness. You don't agree with anyone, it's your way or the highway, and you're not going to get along with a whole lot of people in that way. And high agreeableness, these are the yes people. They say yes to everything, but they're the ones that will stab you in the back and talk behind your back. And so you really don't know what they're thinking. So that can be dangerous. Out of all of these in a relationship, that can be a dangerous one in a relationship. And then the last one would be neuroticism, stable or unstable. Again, uh, it seems opposite because it seems like the ones on the left are more negative, the ones on the right are more positive. But in this case, you might want to lean a little bit more in a relationship to someone else to stable. Not that you want the person to be neurotic, but if you know they tend to be neurotic, that they have to have everything their way, they have to be controlling, then you can prepare for it. Unstable means you don't know when they're going to show this trait, and it could be at the most inopportune times. But if you know people are like this, you can plan, you can predict behavior on what they're going to do. So again, as long as we don't go to the extremes, you're fine. So this is the big five personality theory. You should know it. Happiness across the lifespan. Again, most people have an idea of what for them means that they would be happy. About 30% of the people in the United States rate themselves as very happy. Okay. And it's not a matter of race on this. We see that as a pattern across races. Again, don't have to memorize the chart, just gives you a little more understanding of Costa and McRae's research, review, sample question. I talked about this at the beginning class, the U-shaped curve of marriage. Again, uh, you start at the beginning, you think of the shape of the letter U, and it starts off really, really great. And then as time goes by, so many things are going on. And that's why I said, in order to keep a relationship fresh, it's really important you make time for each other in the relationship. It doesn't matter if it's a heterosexual or homosexual relationship, we see the same pattern in the relationship itself, whether they're married or not married. And when it comes to sex, sex is important in a relationship, but it also has to be a mutual thing that people want. Um, people can have sex into their 90s. That's not unheard of. But the couples have to agree about how much sex, when, if, especially for women, they may need additional lubrication so they're not in pain. Men may have more difficulty getting erections. So it's something that they have to talk about, not just let happen. Okay. So in this relationship, what can help people stay happy together is holding realistic expectations. You know, you can't im- you can't force someone to do something that they don't want to do. The only person who can do it is the person themselves. You can ask and you can talk about it, but in reality, it still comes down to that individual person, what they're going to do. Always focus on the positive first. And it's okay to compromise. That's how negotiations work and in government and in unions and things like that. Sometimes you have to compromise. You may give up something, but you get something in return. And suffering in silence isn't going to change anything. I had a friend of mine whose wife used to always say, "Well, you know what you did." No, I don't know what I did. He would say, "If I knew, then I wouldn't have done it." Well, you figure it out. And she wouldn't tell him. So she like would suffer, like, be a kind of a, you know, I I can't get anything done because he won't listen to me. And it's like, well, have you talked to him about it? Well, he should know, but he doesn't know. So it's going to stay the same unless you're willing to say something, or just, again, not doing it, just letting it happen over and over and over again. Divorce in midlife couples is actually rising. About 1 in 8 women will get divorced after the age of 40. And divorce can be harder for women over 40, especially if they never worked or haven't worked for years, if they stayed home and helped raise the children. And now, where are they? And trying to get back into a job market when you're older is a lot harder. Many people after a divorce actually end up happier than they were. They can redefine themselves. They know, I'm not like the married person now. They actually can learn who they are and fit in very well as a middle adult person. So why do marriages fall apart? They spend less time together. They get more individual. They forget that bond. Life is busy. It really is. And sometimes with children and work and everything going on in life in the world, it can be a real struggle. Divorce is more socially acceptable now than it was in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. Um, Women are less dependent on husbands emotionally, economically, because they may have jobs. Um, Passion eventually isn't always there later on in life. You have to work it in. You have to do something in order to keep that alive. And there's stress. And stress is a big issue. And health concerns can be a big issue too. If one of the two adults are struggling with health issues, and of course, infidelity. One person in the relationships decides to cheat on the other person. Remarriage, 75 to 80% of divorced people remarry, usually within 2 to 5 years.
You missed one.
Did I miss one? Oh,
Yeah, it was mental health.
oh,
Mental health can be a really, really
oh,
big reason why somebody is getting divorced.
yeah, you are absolutely right. And especially if the person knows that what's going on, but chooses not to do anything about it.
Yeah.
If there are, and that happens, and sometimes it was a mental health issue all along, and the person there, the spouse may have known about it and thought they could change the person, which they can't. Um, it's great if those two individuals can be supportive of each other and help the other person, but sometimes whatever the mental health issue is, whether it's bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, anger issues, if there are, drug issues, any type of like gambling addiction, any of these things could cause real emotional problems, especially if the other individual won't talk about it or get help. A lot of people will not go for counseling. Some will, but some will not. They'll use excuses. Oh, I can't do this. We can't afford this. Well, there are plenty of places to get free mental health. Not as many as there used to be, but they're still out there. And but if the person isn't willing to go, the other individual doesn't always have an option. They may need to get out of the relationship for their own sanity and their own sake. So thank you for
Yeah,
bringing
safety
that
is the
up.
biggest one. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Especially abuse, because it does happen. Uh, more women are abused, but women also can abuse men too. Empty nest syndrome, sometimes that happens to stay-at-home moms once all the kids are gone, but it doesn't happen as much as it used to because not too many women are still just stay-at-home moms, you know. They're out there in the workforce, so it's less they actually have to worry about. Um, Benefits to children leaving home, well, they have more, you know, time to spend with each other. We talk about that U curve going up because now you have that. You have more time in general because you're not running your kids all over creation. You don't have to take them to soccer and take them to football and do this and have all the money go to this. But, you know, sometimes it can be stressful then when they come back, and we call those kids boomerang children, and we'll talk about them in a minute. But sometimes parents are what we call helicopter parents. They like micromanage, they hover over their kids, even children in college students. I can remember a few years ago, I had a parent call me and wanted to know all about how her young man who was in college was doing. And it's like, ma'am, I can't talk to you. I can't speak to you at all. Why not? It's like, because this is college. And the only person I can talk to is the student. Well, what if they were younger? They could be in kindergarten and I still couldn't talk to them because at the college level, you can only speak with the student. We have rules about privacy. So she was not very happy about that, but luckily the dean backed me up for everything like that. So you don't have to worry about your parents finding out what your grades are or anything like that or what your assignments are. But there are, you know, parents that will do that. They will follow you everywhere, you even into your job, So we know parents have, written their kids' resumes. They've gone to their kid's employer to, say, hey, you're not treating my son or daughter correctly. Well, why didn't your son or daughter come and talk to me? Well, they didn't want to say anything. So, yeah. Employees have Employers have been contacted by parents and urged them to hire their children. Again, when I worked at Kennywood, I did interviews for years. And I've had many a parent come in with their young person, and you could see, if it was the person was maybe 14 or 15, why. But we still would say, this is an interview between, your child and us because we're going to hire them. We're not hiring you unless you want to apply for a job, but that's going to be a different interview. But yeah, or parents who have called, and said, well, I didn't like that you fired my child. I think my child should be hired again. It's like your child stole money. Well, you can't prove that. Actually, we can. We have it on film. Well, it could have been doctored. Why would we doctor it? Your child stole money. You're lucky we're not arresting them. So, sometimes that happens, but there are parents that are like that. They will micromanage their child, and their child doesn't. Sometimes the child likes it, and other times the child is like, "Please stay at home, mom or dad." And then boomerang children, they come back, and usually it's because of economic reasons. They couldn't get a job. They're done with college, and it's been hard to find something that will pay enough for rent. Some come home after divorce. Um, 1/3 of adults are actually still living with parents. Now, it's possible they moved back because of health reasons of their parents. That's a different thing. This is kids who had to come back because of some other reason. Most will pay rent, so that can help the family, but not always. They may assume that mom and dad are still gonna, you know, do the laundry and cook dinner and do all of that. And again, just different chart. Sandwich generation is children and parents. can you hang on one second? I'm going to close my door because they have a lecture going on right next door. Okay, sorry about that. We never had anybody next door, so that was just a little loud for you because they're literally right next door. So the sandwich generation, this is parents are living longer. They have children who are born later in the marriage or the relationship. So they're tugged from both directions or squished like a sandwich in between. And there'll come a point, I don't think any of you are old enough that you could say this is you, but there will come a point that you will see your role reversed. You will become the parent to your parent. You will hear yourself saying things to your parent that they said to you. Like, why did you do that, Mom? Why did you do that, Dad? Don't you know that's wrong? Why did you let someone in the house? You didn't know who they are. They could have hurt you in some way. And you'll talk to your parents just like if they were children. It happens. It happens somewhere in almost everyone's relationship with their parents along the way. If the parents need a place to live or parents are ill, most of the time the burden falls on the wife. Not always, but a good portion of the time. And again, being in this situation where your parents are still living and you have children that are growing, that whole generational thing can actually be very beneficial for everyone. Okay, sorry. So a lot of families are multi-generation. So you have grandparents living in the home with the parents and the children. As adults get older, they may wrestle with not being able to do what they could do. You don't want to leave them at home because they left the stove on and almost burned the house down, or they're getting very forgetful and they're forgetting to take their medication and they need more help than you can give, just like over the phone. So, caregivers may see that as part of their role of taking care of their parents and of their children. And, when we talk about the next generation, the older adult generation, um, a lot of parents don't want to give that up. They don't want to give up that freedom, because you're basically saying things have changed and you don't have the independence that you had before. Now, the collective point of view, so, collective cultures tend to see that as a tradition and it's expected. And individualistic cultures like the United States and Europe, many times people think of it as a burden. And grandparents, again, middle adulthood may mean becoming a grandparent, and some grandparents are very close to the grandchildren. Great grandparents tend to be not as involved, and great grandfathers in particular tend to be less involved than grandmothers. And children a lot of times think of, uh, their grandparents kind of as their buddy, and they are kind of supporters for them. Spousal abuse, I have just a couple seconds to do it. Let me see how many more I have to do. Okay. I am going to stop here because we're not going to finish this. So I will start here next week because this is on the final. So I just want to write myself a note right now. So slide 36. So that's where we'll start. Okay, so let's go over what we're going to do for the test again. Let me get out of this. First, does anybody have any questions for what we have right now? Okay, so uh, the test will open in about 5 minutes or so on Blackboard. So at that time, but you can take up to a 15-minute break. So I have 1 minute so by quarter after, you would have to be back on. You have to be on camera when you're taking the exam. If you don't put your camera on, I'm not going to grade your exam. So you have to be on camera to do this. Yes, Diana, a question?
Yeah, can we not start without break like some
No.
people? Okay.
No, because I'm stuck in this room until everyone gets
Yeah,
done.
I'm sorry.
So I would like to go to the bathroom first because I could be here till 9 o'clock and, so, so yeah, I mean, as soon as I get back from the bathroom, you can start, but yeah, the test will open in a couple minutes. So you're going to take the test. So download the test, either highlight it or write the answers, send them to me. You're going to attach in that same email, you're going to attach the questions that you did on your own. So that was the essay questions that you had to do. You'll attach those. When you're done with the test, you send that to my email. I will be opening my email as they come in. I will check it and I will send you a response. Got it? You're done. Once you get that response from me, you are done for the evening. You can work on whatever you want. You can watch some of the other videos that are already filmed. You can study. You can go play Parcheesi if you want. It's your time to do that. Any questions? Okay, so you have to be on in 15 minutes. I'm going to run to the restroom. When you see my face again, then you will be able to start the test.